When it comes down to it, Mill really isn't a burn deck. It is more of a control deck when it comes to playing removal or graveyard hate or just interaction in general. And when it comes to this game, you'll see that players tend to have sideboard cards that have a lot of application throughout different strategies, especially applications with burn and mill. But really, at the end of the day, for us, it's more of an annoyance than an actual solution to the problem that they have. Enjoy the game. Game one. Fresh league, pretty good hand. Opponent fetches, the Archive Trap is greedy, and our opponent street rates as well. So Living End, again, I feel like I've showcased Living End enough in this channel to start with, but for some reason our opponent doesn't search anything with the Troll of Kaza Doom, and I think it's because, well, the Watery Grave and the Blood Crypt that I milled over are probably their only two black sources, which kind of makes sense. You do want ways to suspend Living End if it gets there. Our opponent keeps searching, and unfortunately we need to find a surgical. We do have Mainboard Surgical Extraction, and at this point, what am I going to do? Cycle away Fractured Sanity? No, I have to hold up Drown. I have to make my opponent essentially have the force. As they pass away here, I think this is going to look like a pretty quick round of game 1 Magic, but I promise you game 2 and 3 are a lot more promising. So let's fetch, let's make our opponent have it. Living End costs 0. Even if they didn't have a graveyard, this would be fine, but Force of Negation locks it up. They got a board, and we don't really have a way to win next game. Let's go to round 2. When it comes to game 2, I'll actually show off our graveyard and show off the fact that even though we mull to 6, I can creep a greedy 1-land hand thanks to Preordain. The power of mill and the power of unbanned cards in Modern. We need to do more of that in this format, honestly, but we find our Field of Ruin and we let our opponent go. Extirpate and Spell Pierce is, honestly, spoiler, going to lead to a pretty quick game 2 for us, so this is going to be pretty good. Hedron Crab, Stripe Burn of Wonder gets cycled away. We have a Polluted Delta. We're going to mill them just a little bit, try and see if we can find the Living End. We're going to have to wait till next round, so that's fine. Our opponent is going to be looking for their lands. They're going to cycle away some raids. They're going to try and find some options like Force Negations and stuff, and that's perfectly fine. We have our Extirpate, we have our Spell Pierce, and oh wow, the Archive Trap is actually going to be a fantastic draw as well. Now, we mill them out a little bit. They don't have a basic. We Extirpate the Living End, and at this point, if they wanted to play the long game, they can't even, because for some reason they didn't grab a basic at all. I imagine they misclicked, but I see the 4 Leyline of Sanctities, folks. Before we go to game 3, let's keep those in mind. And keep in mind, honestly, that although this is a good card against us, it's more so an annoyance than an actual solution. Let's do it. Remember what I said, folks, annoyance more so than an actual solution. Now, Soul Guide Lantern thankfully exiles without, kind of targeting our opponent. We have the Drown as well, so I think I have to keep this hand. If our opponent develops themselves, like, I can also technically play around a Force of Vigor if I don't play both out, but I think I might end up getting there. So if we do end up finding some mill spells, the Extirpate is there, which is great. In this list, I'm so happy I keep finding the Extirpates. It's a one of. I have 4 Mainboard Surgicals, 5 surgical effects across the 75, and this is a pretty good situation. So I'm going to end up paying the other Soul Guide Lantern and just forcing action, just because they're so low on their hand size. They've been mulliganing pretty aggressively, which is great for us. And we are going to fetch away, thin away our deck, and hold up the Soul Guide Lanterns. They might actually end up getting cycled away depending on how this game goes. Now, we're going to Field of Ruin the Watery Grave. We know that they have the Blood Crypt and the Watery Grave from game 1, so we want to prevent their ability from actually suspending the Living End, I should say, if it goes to a long game. Now, they're going to go for the Living End combo here. I'm going to exile their graveyard, keep the Living End in there, and then have it available as an Extirpate target. Now, they have the Shardless Agent. At this point, the Soul Guide Lanterns aren't really going to do much for me, to my knowledge anyway, based on what I saw. I'm going to Extirpate, and I'm going to see 1 Endurance in their graveyard. So I'm just going to have to hope to dodge that and really draw into other action, because at some point, look, I'm at 15 life right now. 2 damage a turn is a legitimate threat. That's a real problem. So I start cycling everything away at my other Soul Guide Lantern. I have my Crypt Incursion and start building their graveyard again. So I have all the things in the world. I got to hold up Drown as well, right? So I'm going to opt to not hold the Crypt Incursion for now, keep the Graveyard Hate up, and just make my opponent think like, oh, hey, I got to deal with 1 more Soul Guide. And my opponent has found all 4 at this point. So I'm going to go down to 12. I fetched a little bit, so I'm a little bit weaker. And fortunately enough, they don't actually have a 4-drop to play. They do have that black and blue 4-drop, but they don't have any black mana. And we found a Fractured Sanity, which is great. Yeah, the Architects of Will is what I was talking about. Now, we are going to try and bait out the counter magic. We hit the Shardless Agent. Really what I want here is now I want my mill spells to resolve. All right, I'm at 12 life. I need my mill spells to resolve so that I can start milling their library and then gain some life with the Crypt Incursion. Ultimately speaking, I can beat the Endurance that way. If they Endurance away their whole library, that's fine. If their creatures are gone, that library means nothing to them, and then I can find some time to deal with their board. Now, I did board out all of my fatal pushes, which is another thing to be worried about. Now, I kind of hit them on mana a little bit there as well, and I Otawara away the Leyline of Sanctity because I have to crypt, right? And I'm at 5 right now. Things are getting a little precarious, so I'm going to Fractured Sanity, go back to their turn. I'm not going to do anything now. I don't exactly lose on my turn, so I can afford to wait. And so I'm just going to keep it going, keep it moving, let them do their combat. They have lethal with the Violent Outbursts, and this is what I was prepared for, folks. Now, I'm going to Crypt Incursion. That doesn't do anything. And what's nice about the Violent Outburst is it forces them to reveal their whole library. So technically speaking, I'm going to kind of show it on the reveal list here. I'm going to cast my Fractured Sanity. They force it, and that's fine. I'm going to have the ability to drown it at this point. But at least in this case, if I wanted to, based on what I'm milling, I could actually individually remove the cards off the left side here and know exactly what's in their deck. Fortunately speaking, though, I have a Rune Crab. Honestly, this game's over. I don't need to count specifically. We're not going to a long game here. Again, spoilers. So I have the Otawara in case they do anything super crazy, and I'm going to keep it. That's what I have to be aware of. I know they don't really have white to replay the ley lines that are in their hand, and I just need the Otawara in case they start playing big, super crazy creatures. Now, I play the Field of Ruin. I know I don't have any basics. I'm just going to take the red so they don't start casting the red creatures or casting Violent Outbursts or anything like that. I have to be aware of that. Now, this shuts off some of the mana, but they still have Endurance mana up. They are cycling aggressively. They're trying to find that Endurance, and this is actually where things start getting really scary. If you've been noticing, that Endurance is still in their library, potentially in their hand as well, but let's see what happens on our turn. We play the Hedron Crab, then we're going to play the Otawara because that's exactly lethal. And fortunately enough, our opponent did not find the Endurance. I managed to mill them out, and whew, that was a close one, but mill perseveres. Let's do it. Going into game 2 of this league, this is going to be a really interesting list on our opponent's side. I'll go through the motions with you. So Bloodstained Mire, I'm thinking maybe it's some type of grief, and our opponent plays a Stalactite Stalker, which I'm thinking, okay, yeah, this is probably some type of Rakdos Grief. I've seen like a kind of aggressive rogue style build that's been going on, so I'm like, okay, I might get scammed out here. Our opponent plays a very aggressive Ragavan here. I kill the first creature, but Ragavan comes in. They don't play our Hedron Crab, and they play another Ragavan. I'm like, okay, well, I'm not going to play anything here. I'm just going to drown that because you have one card left. Like, what are you going to do with that? Now, they have they have another threat as well. I play both my crabs, play the Rune Crab, Surgical, the Death Shadow, because I'm like, okay, you're playing Death Shadow. You're probably not playing Scam. I see the rest of the deck. They've got Asmo, and they got Underworld Cookbook. So this is not Scam, which is great. It's a cookbook list, which I can't let them go long with, and they're going to start discarding some cards and exiling cards, whatever. They have ultimately the Lightning Bolt as well. Kill one of our crabs. I'm going to take the damage because, look, if I draw a fetch here, which, there you go, I'm going to be able to get them to exactly 20 and then Visions of Beyond. They have one card left in their hand. I almost Fractured Sanity here. I'm like, wait a second, I need a Vision. So they kill my other crab in response. I Visions, and I find the drown for the creature, which is great. And at this point on their turn, I go to Surgical, their Underworld Cookbook. Unfortunately, draw the Orcish Bowmasters. I was hoping to avoid that, but ultimately, if you look at how this game is working out, if I take the Cookbook, 3 cards away, 29 cards left. If I Fractured Sanity them and they draw a card, and then I Fractured again, that's exactly lethal. They need to find a way to deal 6 damage to me, which I think they're going to have a very hard time doing unless they get like a Ragavan or something. So this is spending pretty good. They have 14 cards. They play a non-hasty creature. I'm going to end up, well, taking 2 here, going down to 4. I really don't think they have a way to do anything here. They need like Lightning Bolt plus Bowmasters, and that's why I did it, right? Like, you ultimately have to force your opponent's clock here. I draw land. I could have Archive Trapped here, but obviously that's 13 cards. But we're going to opt to Fractured Sanity. Hard-casted blue sorceries honestly end up being pretty good in Modern. Let's go to game 2. So even though this is an Asmo deck and I'm all once here, I don't actually bring in too many surgical effects. I'm actually going the route of Ensnaring Bridge. And so I'm going to Archive Trap my opponent because they fetch to enable the Stalactite Stalker. I, fortunately enough, do find myself with a Watery Grave available. Now, I'm not going to hit them with it now. I'm going to let them play a spell because I don't want to get like Ragavan again. So then I decide to kill it, let them go off with their Underworld Cookbook engine and discard cards. You're going to create a bunch of food tokens this game, honestly. So at this point, I'm going to then play my Otawara on my turn. Once I get there, I draw the Preordain here, but play the Otawara, pass with the Drown in the Loch. I don't think I want to go aggressively with the land. I can just pass through and maybe counter a creature or something. Now, their Urza Saga, if they don't play a land, is not going to get used that much, which is a big W for us. So I counter another threat, go to my turn, hopefully find a land here. That would be pretty nice. I mean, the Field of Ruin works, so I'm going to play the Rune Crab. I'm going to Preordain. I actually like both of the cards there. The Preordain helps me dig once I draw the Tasha, so I'm going to keep it. And honestly, Tasha's in this deck, once I get past like Oval Chase Daredevil and like a Street Wraith or two, Tasha's actually goes pretty dang deep. Like, Asmo's a 0-cost card, and they have a lot of 1s and 2s, so it's actually a pretty good hit. Now, they Lightning Bolt our Crab, they activate Underworld a bunch, they get a Pyrite Spell Bomb, which is kind of sad. I guess they need it for a Hedron, and Pithing Needle grabs their Field of Ruin. Now, the Pithing Needle, oh, they cast it. They didn't even get it off their land there. So, unfortunately, we can't Field of Ruin them. I honestly would have opted to Field of Ruin into Preordain, but we managed to exile 21 cards with our Tasha, so that's a pretty good consolation prize along with that. Now, the Pithing Needle is honestly going to end up doing really good work here. I think the land, like the Disruption in general, would have been a really good option against them. They definitely would have gotten a Mountain and gone threat heavy, but hey, it would have prevented like getting out threats such as Stalactite or Dead Shadow. I'm going to Preordain. I find both cards that I like. I'm going to play a Flooded Strand. The reason I don't get the Hedron Crab is in case they get like super aggressive or play some crazy nonsense, I want to be able to Crypt Incursion. In here, I can at least Fatal Push without fetching, so that way that confirms that the Crab comes out, I get a mill 3, I get a blocker, and I get some value out of it. Now, they're going to fetch, they grab themselves a Mountain, they're going to play an Inti, another threat that I'm just going to have to deal with here. And at the end of the turn, that's great. I'm just going to Fatal Push and move on. They're going to keep discarding. They're going to keep doing things. They're going to get their value. And this is actually pretty good. They keep discarding cards, which is taking out cards from the top of their library thanks to the exile trigger on the creature they have on the battlefield. They exile a Ragavan. They exile an Asmo. That's huge W's on our side. So I don't think this is going to spell good stuff for our opponent at this point. We're going to play our Rune Crab. We get our value from the Flooded Strand. I want to do that before they have any removal. I crypt them now while they're down. I'm at 52 life, and I tell my opponent, look, you got to figure it out. There's no infinite combo in this deck. You're playing these food tokens relatively fairly. Now, my Rune Crab's gone. They have a Ragavan, non-dashed, thankfully. And we're going to go to our turn. We, unfortunately, you're going to see here in a second, we unfortunately draw ourselves a land, and that's the Polluted Delta. So we're going to hold it in our hand. We're going to make our opponent think we have something, right? It's better to bluff. It's like small moments like this where you don't need to give your opponent any information whatsoever if you don't have to. And that way, if we draw a Crab, we pretty much have lethal. We can like fetch and get a land. Polluted Delta is our better fetch, being able to grab both of our basics in this case. So they're going to swing at us for 5. And we're at 52. I do not care. We're going to 47. Our opponent is exiling the top card of our library, which fortunately enough ends up being a Polluted Delta, another land, which is great. They play a Stalactite Stalker, and honestly, look, they have to actually get me down, but that Fractured Sanity is going to seal the deal here. 2-0 in this league. This is a pretty dang good start. See you in the next one.